We are living in a time of unprecedented change. Globally, people are living longer, and the population of older adults is growing faster than ever. That's creating new opportunities and new challenges when it comes to health, independence, and staying connected. Welcome to the Aging Well podcast, where we explore ideas and practical tools for living well at every stage of life. I am your host, Dr. Jeff Armstrong, here with Corbin Bruton. Technology is playing a tremendous role in helping people not just live longer, but live better. In this episode, we take a close look at what's being called age-friendly tech. We cover everything from smart homes and wearables to digital social platforms and virtual reality. We talk about what's working, what's promising, and what we should be cautious about, especially when it comes to accessibility, usability, and privacy. We explore the exploding market of high tech and what it means for those of us who are seeking to age well.
And I'd like to start this episode by talking about smart home technology. I think that this is one of the fastest growing areas when it comes to helping older adults stay safe and independent at home.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think we're talking about things like voice-controlled assistants, think Alexa, Google Home, some of the other different devices that are out like that. We're seeing a lot more automated lighting, smart thermostats, even fall detection sensors that can be built right into the home.
Totally. And honestly, these tools can be a game changer. Take automated lighting. There's no more fumbling for a switch in the dark, which can really reduce fall risk. And those fall detection systems, some of these can automatically alert emergency services if someone takes a spill.
Yeah, we're also seeing that tech is doing a pretty good job of supporting medication management. I think back to my interview with Samuel Simon, and in the middle of the conversation, his Alexa went off to remind him to take his dementia medication, and didn't edit that out because, of course, it was kind of prudent to keep it in there to help people recognize that these apps can really do a good job in these devices. They can help us to remind us when we have to take medications. There are even like smart pill boxes now that can send alerts to caregivers if doses are missed. I think it's some pretty cool stuff that'll really help to kind of allow for caregivers to have a little bit more comfort in terms of when they're having to deal with maybe an older parent or something like that that's not living with them, but they want to make sure that they're safe.
Well, it's also a convenience, right? So anyone who's dealt with someone who has dementia or even a physical disability where you're kind of becoming their caregiver, it can be a lot and it can be really overwhelming. And there's going to be times where, you got your life plus taking care of theirs, and you might forget. So if we set reminders on our own calendar or we set timers for certain things, why not utilize the technology that we have and almost have a digital assistant that sends those reminders? It's a conveniency, in my opinion.
Well, I think it's a little bit more than a convenience even. I think it's an assurance for the individuals because more and more older adults are wanting to age at home or age in place. And it's a lot more difficult to get into assisted care living, senior living facilities, and those types of things. And so just having that assurance that your parent or your loved one is safe is I think pretty critically important.
Yeah, and speaking of safety, there's also smart locks, video doorbells, and systems that allow remote check-ins from family members.
Yeah, in some cases, some of those drive me a little bit crazy in terms of, you're constantly seeing the videos online of, people's doorbells that have the cameras in them and they're picking up somebody doing whatever on their porch and everything. But there's a certain safety piece to that where if you do have an older, maybe more vulnerable adult at home, they can screen who's at the door. There's many ways that we can remotely check in with our family members. And that reminds me of Ohm.
Yeah, Ohm, is that the smart knob from episode 261 with Akshita Ear?
Yeah, that was 261 with Akshita Iyer. That was a pretty interesting episode. I mean, it's actually a very simple device, if you think about it, and it's one I would never have thought about. I mean, it's a brilliant thing for Akshita to come up with that, you have a knob that basically functions like any other knob on your stove, but rather than having to replace the entire stove with like a smart stove, you can simply replace the knob. The knob can be set on a timer so that if it stays on too long, then it'll shut off. Or if there's no movement involved, no activity involved, it can shut off. And it can also communicate with the caregiver or the family member so that, they just know that the family member is okay and they're not likely to start a fire. And this was all initiated by her mother getting Alzheimer's disease and just a few times forgetting to turn off the stove. And I think this is something that's a product that can also be beneficial for young ones as well. We have a lot more latchkey kids that have to come home from school and be home alone before the parents get home from work. And they can operate the stove and you don't have to worry about them leaving it on and starting a fire.
Yeah. You mentioned the latchkey kids, and I just started thinking, with technology, we don't. Some of them might not even know what a latchkey is. They just punch in the code to their door, and it'll unlock for them. And then if they forget to lock it behind them, after a certain amount of time, it just automatically locks. So I think it's kind of the same concept. I mean, as far as monitoring an individual with dementia to make sure that they don't burn the house down, if you think about it, it's like a glorified, I don't want to say baby monitor, but it's an adult monitor. It's pretty, I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think even adult monitor sounds a little bit demeaning. I think it's just, again, it's just a means of staying connected with that older adult and just giving, the reassurance that everything is okay with them, so that, we can be alerted if they happen to fall, or if they don't do a specific activity for a period of time, then an alert will go to the family member. So somebody will go check on that person.
Yeah.
And I think it's a great idea. And I think it's an idea that, like the smart knob should be in senior living facilities.
Mm-hmm.
You have people who, maybe they regularly cook for themselves and they don't cook for a couple of days. That should be an alert to the staff at the facility that something could be wrong, and so just kind of having a way of just checking in, again, not babysitting them or adult sitting them, but just having a means of, checking in with the adult.
Now, all these examples that you're giving, these are great for peace of mind. But honestly, let's talk about some of the drawbacks. Are there any concerns when using this technology?
Well, I guess it depends on the situation. One major concern is setup and usability. A system is only going to be helpful if the person using it understands how it works. And we know that a lot of older adults can be a little less tech savvy than some of the younger creators that might be making some of these devices. So it's important that they understand how it works and are able to operate it. And so it has to be something really simple. And that's one thing I liked about the Ohm smart knob is that it's very simple. I mean, everybody knows how to operate a knob on a stove. And so it doesn't change that at all. The technology and maybe setting up and monitoring may be a little bit more difficult, but even with a good simple app that all they have to do is kind of turn it on, load it up, and somebody can help them with that, and they're good to go. There's also that issue of cost. Not all these solutions are affordable, nor are they covered by insurance. And so it can get expensive for somebody to kind of tech out their house.
Yeah. Totally. I mean, it is dropping in price. But I remember when the smart technology first came out, and it's kind of a luxury to have. And but now that I don't know, I feel like it's becoming the norm and more mass produced. And I feel like things are becoming a lot more cheaper. I mean, we even have a little smartphone AI on almost everyone's device right now. And so I foresee it becoming really affordable. Best example I can give is big screen TVs. Big screen TVs back in the day used to be incredibly expensive, and now you want to get a big screen flat TV. They're fairly affordable for comparatively of how they used to be back in the day.
Yeah, I just think some of the technology can start to add up in price. When everything is more individualized. There's also that issue of kind of some of the complication of having so many different apps for so many different smart tech devices. And so one of the issues really to consider is how do we get the companies that are making these to integrate their products as effectively as possible so that different devices are communicating. It's like, okay, yeah, maybe the smart knob and the stove hasn't been used in a period of days, but we know that the door has been locked and unlocked, lights have gone on and off. So we know there's activity in the home. where you have motion sensors that we know that they're moving around and they're okay. And so when you get all of that information together, and with AI can actually pull a lot of that information together and kind of ascertain whether an alert needs to be sent out to, either, medical emergency services or to a family member.
Well, even though it can be a convenience and you can intertwine a lot of your devices to synchronize into one area, I would say that the subject that we really cannot overlook is privacy. More connected devices definitely means more potential data exposures, especially if devices aren't properly secured.
Yeah, and I think that's a responsibility of the companies that are developing these devices. It was a big concern, I know, for Akshita as they were developing their device. That was probably one of the hardest things, was how to maintain a level of safety and privacy with that, so that somebody couldn't just simply hack into the device and take control of the knob or do whatever. So there's that aspect. And then again, privacy, we are sharing a lot of information. But one thing I think we have to get past in our age right now is that to have technology to the level that we have and want it, we're going to have to give up a little bit of our privacy. So the issue isn't that we're giving up privacy. It's how is that information that can be obtained from our smart devices, how is that being used? How can it be used? And what are the consequences for somebody who actually utilizes that information in a wrong way? And I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges that we're facing in regards to the privacy issue is who has access to this information? How can it be used nefariously to harm somebody?
Did hear on that there is, I guess, there is a way how to determine what company or what device is actually giving your information. And I wish I could remember it. But when you're punching in your email, because a lot of these devices they require an email, if you put a slash and then the device, so if you're giving it to slash Google Nest or slash Alexa or slash something, then when you're getting all these spam emails, it'll trigger, okay, well, what's causing me to get this spam email? How's my information getting out there when I'm not willingly giving my information? And then you can look to see if it got sent to you by one of the slashes, and then you can determine which device is actually giving your information. And I thought that was a pretty cool technique. So it comes in handy when when you're trying to figure out how someone keeps hacking into your Netflix account. Anyways, food for thought. Next, I say let's dive into health and wellness. There's a lot of those wearable devices like fitness trackers, smartwatches, and medical alert wearables are becoming essential tools for aging well.
A lot of devices out there, and they're becoming more and more affordable. These are devices that track heart rate, activity levels. One big reason why I use one is for sleep quality. Some can even detect irregular rhythms. So if they're high tech enough, they might be able to, again, send alert if you have somebody with a heart condition. I've recently just acquired the company is called Amazfit, and it's their Helio strap. It's very similar to the Whoop. I'm a little too Scottish, too cheap to invest in the Whoop. Whoop is probably, I'd say hands down, probably the best health tracking device that you can get out there, except it requires a subscription. So you're talking, couple $100 a year to be able to maintain the device, and that goes on forever. The Helio is very similar. It is a faceless device, goes on the wrist. Eventually, hopefully, you can find straps that'll put it up around the arm if you want to wear it on the arm, which could be a little bit more accurate. But I started using that. It's only $99 on Amazon, and we'll include a link. So if you want to purchase one and actually help support the podcast, you can do that as well. But for $99, it's a pretty good watch. It's cheaper than my Garmin. And I think we've mentioned on other episodes that I've used a Garmin for probably well over a year now. And I like the Garmin. I like the information I get from it, but the battery life really sucked on that thing. Literally, the battery would just suck energy. It would last me maybe about 36 hours on a good charge. And then I'd have to charge it again. So you're only getting like 2 nights sleep and then you get to wear it through one day and then it's charging. And the Helio actually holds a charge for 10 days. It's a 10-day charge, but they'll tell you once you get to about 30%, they want you to charge it up again. But even if you let it go down to 30%, you're looking at 7 full days before you have to really charge it. And to me, that is so much better because I'm getting the information all day, every day. It's getting a better track of what my heart rhythms are, what it's kind of looking for. The algorithm can work better. And I get really very similar data to what I was getting with the Garmin. And it's fairly comparable to the information I get from my CPAP machine as well. So and you got to remember too, that none of these are going to be equivalent. And so you can't compare your score from say a Whoop to a Helio. You can see that they're rather similar. They trend the same, so a sleep score of 75 on the Garmin might be a 80 on the Whoop and a 72 on your Helio. But if they're tracking the same, where they go up the same, go down the same, then you're getting reasonable information. Because the whole point of these isn't to get, scientific data. It's just simply to get some data that can help you make more informed decisions as to what am I doing in my diet, my exercise, my sleep, and so on. And so these could be a really great thing for older adults. Mine, even the Helio gives me scores on my hypopnea, and kind of really giving me an indication of whether I am, having sleep apnea or not, which is interesting because my scores are showing far worse than my CPAP machine shows. But I'd rather it show a worse score than an overly positively inflated score, which I had a night sleep the other night and my CPAP machine said I had a score of 100. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me because I did not sleep well. I felt like I was awake half the night. And, I saw one influencer on YouTube that has a lot of, I forget what his company is called, but he does, kind of has an app for your CPAP machines to give you further information. But he talked about how these devices are basically like giving you a participation ribbon. It's always good job. You slept well last night. And so wearing these devices can help give us some information. It can help us to improve the quality of our life. If you're enjoying the Aging Well podcast, be sure to like, subscribe, or follow on your favorite platform so you will never miss an episode. And if you find our conversations helpful, please share the podcast with a friend because aging is something we're all doing and we're better at doing it together. And support our guests in this podcast financially by visiting the affiliate links in the episode description below and use the links or codes provided for discounts on products we have vetted and feel comfortable recommending to our valued viewers and listeners. Thank you. And now back to the podcast. I don't know. Do you wear any kind of tracker?
Just a classic Fitbit, and that's it. And
Well, that's a device.
Yeah, I know. But when you were talking about how you got to recharge it after, 7 to 10 days, I was like, oh, that would be nice. I got to charge this one almost every 2 to 3 days. And it's super annoying because sometimes, it's charging and you wake up in the next morning and you're getting ready and you leave the door and you're like, I left my Fitbit on the charger. And I wish there was a way for them to, just like with hybrid cars, how certain cars have, as it's driving down the road, the rotation on the back wheels are charging the batteries. I wish there was a way for it to monitor maybe our steps or our own heart rate, and that increases the battery. And I feel like that would get a lot of people to be motivated to actually move around. It's, instead of charging it and forgetting about it, they're just like, well, I'm just going to actively move and get my steps in. And as it monitors my heart rate, that little shock increases. I bet we're not too far from that technology, but one can only.
I think nobody's just invested time in it, I guess, because you think about it, there's been watches for years that are self-charging because as you swing your arm, it captures that movement and uses it to charge the battery.
Yeah,
you're right. I mean, hybrid batteries do the same thing, so it is interesting, and maybe that's some of the technology that might be in something like the Whoop or the Helio that give you a longer battery charge. I have heard that the Apple Watch and the Fitbits have horrible battery lives. The Garmin are supposed to be a lot better. So I don't want to poo-poo Garmin because I do think they have probably the best algorithm for sleep quality. And it is very possible. My wife bought it for me as a gift through Amazon. And there are a lot of shady companies on Amazon that are selling products that are knockoffs. And you have to be very careful of that. And I don't believe she bought it directly from the Garmin store. So for our aging listeners out there that are buying some of this smart tech, be aware, make sure you're buying it from the right source. If you're buying something online, buy it from the company store, because most of these companies have their own Amazon stores now. And so you don't have to go through some third party. That I actually bought a percussion gun, massage gun. And I knew I was buying a knockoff cheap. I didn't expect great things from it, but I wasn't going to invest like $300 in one. And the battery went on it and there was a warranty to it. It was a little bit more of a hassle getting it replaced. And I had to do things. I had to send it to like a house in Kentucky. And it was like, okay, there's either it's a lot of middlemen in there and they're probably just buying cheap items from China and, putting it on a market. A lot of these companies will buy things that are kind of knockoffs and put their own little label on it. So there's a lot of things to be concerned about as we look at some of this technology. And so I think the buyer beware phrase needs to be injected here a little bit, that, when you're buying something, make sure you're buying quality, buy something that is going to last for you. You're going to spend some money on it. So spend a reasonable amount of money. Don't go cheap. I know there are smart watches out there that are much, much cheaper than this Helio, but I wouldn't trust them because I don't know the brand. And look at reviews, study the reviews, but also know that reviews are also going to come with a little bit of bias because sometimes they're sponsored by the company or people are just, favorable reviews get better likes on YouTube and so on than, less favorable likes. I went on a little rant there.
Yeah, I'm trying to. Well, one thing that you did mention was that it's really cool how it tracks a lot of your health stuff, and I think we should also talk about that there are some remote monitoring systems that are out there that actually send data straight to your doctor.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty big shift. I mentioned my CPAP machine. My doctor gets all that information. Kind of a little bit scary that they could be monitoring my sleep while I'm sleeping, but I think that's great because, when you're tracking this information and somebody goes into their physician, the physician can pull up, I see, this, and this has been happening. Let's talk about that. Or what can we do to improve that? So that's a pretty big shift. And I think instead of waiting for a problem to get serious enough for a clinic visit, our care teams now, if they do medicine well, are going to be able to intervene earlier and potentially avoiding hospital stays, should be able to drive down the cost of healthcare considerably.
Yeah, and telehealth platforms are another huge development, especially after COVID. I mean, they really started taking off a few years prior to the COVID pandemic, but after COVID, they really took off. And I think it's a way for older adults to connect with their healthcare providers from home without reducing the need for transportation and wait time and possible exposure to ailments and stuff like that. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I think it's great. I mean, especially since healthcare is getting much more privatized, much more spread out. In a lot of communities, it's a lot harder to access. If you live in a rural community, they're closing a lot of hospitals, so it's a lot harder to get to a doctor. I mean, an older adult that maybe shouldn't be driving, being able to stay home, keeping you off the road for that one occasion could, save lives. But it also, it saves a lot of time. And it saves really a lot of stress on the older person and on the healthcare system. So it's a lot easier just to be able to check in periodically. Most situations with your doctor, you really don't need to go in, especially if you have some of these tech devices that are monitoring your blood pressure, your heart rate, heart rhythm. Maybe you have glucose monitors. I mean, there's so many different devices that can provide information. All you need to do is be able to check in with the doctor and say, hey, I've been experiencing this. What do I need to do? And the doctor, may say you need to come in. We need to see you in person. Let's do that. Or, okay, everything's looking fine. Let's check in again in 6 months.
The one thing I've always just kind of questioned about the digital, digitally seeing your doctor is like, what is the doctor checking? When you're like, I have these symptoms, maybe I'm just used to, if I had a sore throat, I'm used to the doctor taking the swab and putting it in the back of my throat versus what are they, and then the doctor's just telling, like, you're explaining your symptoms to the doctor digitally instead of them actually examining you and then giving you a diagnosis over. That's the one thing that I find super interesting and weird. And I'm like, well, I can Google my symptoms too and figure it out that way.
Well,
That's
they're
that's
not
my
necessarily, asking you for symptoms. They're going to ask you the right questions. There are things that they can look at remotely. I mean, they can have you open your mouth into the camera and they can kind of look in. But it's kind of that, okay, these are your symptoms. Yeah, that it makes sense for you to come in and we need to check this out further. In other situations, it's probably like, let me know, it's like the old take 2 aspirins, call me in the morning kind of thing. It's like, could be something that is just going to pass. There's no need to come in and check. So I think it's important how we use, telemedicine, but I don't think you're going to have too many doctors that are going to be diagnosing things just based on what you tell them and based on just talking to you on a screen.
right.
But when you're managing conditions, if you're managing somebody with diabetes or somebody with, even Alzheimer's, different forms of dementia, Parkinson's, checking in remotely is going to be fairly effective. And I want to give a plug here for Thrive 25.
Yes. Thrive 25 from Ryan Schneider. He was one of our guests on episode 266. Strongly encourage our listeners to go check out that episode. So, Dr. Armstrong, what is Thrive 25?
Yeah, so Ryan Schneider is one of the founders of the company. And so, he was a guest on that episode. Thrive 25 is a pretty cool app. It's a subscription app that allows you to track up to 70 biomarkers. So you can enter that information in. So you have a doctor's visit, you get your cholesterol, your triglycerides, blood pressure, all those things can be entered into the app. And the app is able to kind of pull together information from multiple different sources. Because we go to multiple different doctors. If you're a woman, you're going to a gynecologist, you're going to your primary care physician, you're going to maybe a dermatologist to have your skin checked. There's so many different physicians. You got dentists, you have all this medical information that's out there in a lot of different places. And the healthcare system might be able to access that, but how well can we access all that information at a thing, just pulling up our phone? And so this app allows us to get reminders about upcoming appointments. So you can put your appointments in. It can give you tips on optimizing your health. It can, remind you that you're due for your colonoscopy. So you need to schedule that. So you don't have to necessarily wait for the physician to say, hey, we haven't had a colonoscopy in a couple years. We're due. I don't necessarily want to be reminded that I have to have a colonoscopy, but it's a pretty cool app. It costs less than really a Netflix subscription. And our viewers can actually get early access using the code that is going to be provided in the description notes. So just kind of look down below for that if you're interested in possibly subscribing to this service. And it is a relatively cheap service. I think it's pretty interesting.
I am curious, especially with your comment on colonoscopy reminder. Have you subscribed to using this?
Okay, I don't know how you get from my colonoscopy to have I subscribed, but I have, and I was kind of invited to be an early adopter to the app by Ryan after our interview. I don't use it enough. I use it. There is a tremendous amount of potential for it to be used. I'm gradually kind of entering in that information. I think the more you're tapping into healthcare, the more usable this will be because you're now putting information in, instead of just one data point for, your cholesterol, you're having annual data points that are tracking where your cholesterol is going and how your weight is interacting with that. And one of the really cool things about the way the system is set up, it will remind you of stuff like, hey, and it knows where you live. So it's like, hey, notice that the weather is nice in Chicago. This might be a great day to get outside and do some walking. And so you get those kind of prompts that can really help people engage in their healthcare, in their wellness, and getting more physically active and so on. One way that I used it right off the bat was, I just pretty much started on the CPAP and I was not feeling really great with it. I mean, I was having difficulty sleeping. Breathing was kind of hard at night. And so I just went into the little AI advisor and typed in a couple questions about CPAP. And it was like, well, it sounds like you might need to do this, this, and that. And have you tried this? And type in an answer. Well, what about, and it's like having this conversation with the app to, come up with some solutions to your healthcare issues. So you can, have questions about dieting. I have not tried it, but I'm sure you could go in there, would keto benefit me, and then have that conversation back and forth about your lifestyle and what your needs are, where your body weight is and those types of things. And what I found was, it gave me some really good tips on how to sleep on my right side and, how sleeping on my right side was probably a better side to sleep on, which, I mentioned that I feel like I sleep better on my right side or left side rather. And it was funny. It was like, yeah, the data would show that that's probably right. It's probably, and so it was informed, but it gave me some, maybe prop some pillows behind you, things that are going to keep you on your side and, how to kind of adjust the nose piece so that, like with the straps, it wanted it a little bit tighter on the right side so that it's less likely to pull down to my left as I'm laying on my left side. So I know I'm rambling here, but it gave me some really good tips and I had a great night's sleep that night. So I really got to give a plug for it. As cheap as it is, it's worth investing in and trying it out. I mean, you can cancel it at any time kind of policy. So it's not like you're buying into a many year subscription, and it's not one of those subscriptions where it's going to automatically just keep taking your credit card even though your subscription is ended. So I think it's worth looking into. And again, anybody that might be interested in that, go back to episode 266, listen to the conversation, hear about the product and how it's developed and what the intentions are with the company, and how you can benefit from it. If you want to give it a try, use the link that we provide and you can help support this podcast.
Speaking of you entering questions and asking that to those devices, a lot of these healthcare systems now offer access to medical information online. What are your thoughts on this?
I kind of have pluses and minuses with it. My medical plan has my chart, which I think is fairly common. I like it, but I don't. I mean, it's nice to be able to go in and all that medical information I can pull up pretty quickly. So that's a big positive. I can communicate with my doctor, but I find like whatever happened to just being able to pick up the phone and call your doctor. I know there's all the HIPAA restrictions now where somebody just can't give you information over the phone. You can't just say, hey, I'm Jeff Armstrong. I want to know what this result was for this test. But it does give you good communication with your physician, gives you good reminders when you have things. My issue with it is it's just so cumbersome all the time to have to log into it. And when you're waiting for reports, you have to kind of wait for an email to tell you that the report is there, or you keep checking every day. And when I log in, it's like one of those 3-step validations to be able to get in. And it's like, I just log into this thing, Can't you just give me a link from my email where I can open it up without having to type in a 6-digit code and, give my, zodiac sign and, where my mother was born in order to get into the system. But again, there has to be those protections. So I understand that. It does allow you to have kind of broader communication. The biggest challenge for me is oftentimes if you do enter in a question, you're going to be several days before you get a response. And sometimes for me, it's like, Dr. Google can give me that information faster. And for me, Dr. Google is probably okay because I have a bit more of a background that gives me a little bit better information to understand what I'm getting on Google. But for maybe the average person who doesn't have that physiology background and so on, you don't want to be trusting Dr. Google. So you might have to be a little bit more patient waiting on that healthcare system to kind of connect with you in that online information. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, well, we just don't have anything to kind of chime into that. So just gotta
Yeah,
kind of process
yeah.
everything. But I agree. I think as far as HIPAA law goes, having that information on an area, even my charts, which is the most easily accessed. I do think that there is a fine line because you're still sharing that personal health information in a web-based browser, and I don't know. I question the firewall safety on those, but that's neither here
Yeah.
nor there. I'm not trying to start a
Yeah, I
conspiracy
mean,
theory podcast or anything like that.
well, I don't think there's any conspiracy. I don't think there are that many people out there that are trying to hack into our medical information. And probably 99% of us have medical information that nobody else in the world gives a crap about. Now, maybe, you're the president of the United States and your political adversaries are, wanting to look into your mental health and that kind of stuff. That might be a little bit more of a privacy threat, but obviously data privacy, cybersecurity is going to be paramount. Medical information is sensitive and it's considered even more sensitive now than it has ever been. And so breaches can have real consequences for us. But, I like the fact that I have the access, and at the same time, I feel like sometimes it creates a little bit more disconnect between the doctor and the patient.
Yeah. I mean, we are also seeing AI and machine learning that's taking place, and people use that with their own personal care. Systems that can detect subtle changes in health patterns and make tailored recommendations. So that, I mean, that's kind of a bonus, right?
Yeah, I think it's impressive, but again, we have to ensure that these tools remain transparent and that they're also inclusive. Because a lot of times, especially when cost is involved, you privilege the privileged, and the underprivileged don't have access to that opportunity. And so, if AI algorithms are trained on biased data, they're not going to probably serve all populations equally well. And so, we have to consider that as well. Where is that information coming to or coming from? And I think this is something that I like about Thrive 25 is that you're getting a lot more information, and AI is able to draw into all that information that it's pulling and can kind of give you more unbiased tips as to, what kind of steps you should take to improve your health.
And one thing that is kind of cool, especially after the whole pandemic, is technology. It's not just about health and safety, it's also about helping older adults stay socially connected and engaged, especially with friends or family members that have moved out of state, or maybe they're not mobile or don't have access to getting to those family members. I think it's like a really cool way for everyone to stay connected.
Yeah. And I struggle with that to a certain extent because how we are defining connected anymore is very loose. Connected to me is more face to face, in person kind of interactions. And we can begin to think, oh, well, I'm on social media several times a day. I have friends on Facebook. I see my doctor once a year in a telecall, have video calls with my grandkids once a week. We all are online communities. You even have multiplayer games that I see, particularly in, the younger kids, kids my kids' age that, for so long, like my son's major connection with his friends was through just playing video games. That was great during COVID, but, there's times when, get out of the house, go visit your friends. A lot fewer teenagers these days are getting their driver's license at 16 because they don't have a need to. When I was a kid, you want to get your driver's license as soon as possible just for the freedom to be able to get out and go see your friends and, go anywhere you wanted to go to the mall and, scope out the chicks at the mall and, go to, sporting events and doing all these things. You had a lot more freedom. Now today, kids seem to be content with just having that more social connection through the internet or, just through social media. But again, during the COVID-19 pandemic, this technology really became a lifeline for many people. And so there's goods and bads that go along with it.
Yeah, and there's tons of platforms out there that specifically are designed for older adults with larger fonts, simplified navigation, and context tailored to their interests. Some focus on educational context and virtual museum tours and classes, discussion groups even.
Yeah, I think you have, a lot of other different games and things that offer supportive cognitive stimulation. So it is kind of neat that you can go visit a museum without having to leave your home. Like, you're an older adult. You really can't afford to travel to France to see the Louvre. You can see it virtually. Or, you live on the West Coast, you want to go see, the Museum of Modern Art in New York. You can see these virtual tours now. And so from an educational, mindful stimulation point of view, these can be really, really good. And then when you start looking at some of the different games and things that are out there, there's a lot of games, particularly those that purport to be memory games. There are strategy games that are supposedly designed to help keep the mind sharp. I think we need to use a lot of these with caution. If it's just repetitive kind of stuff, it's not going to be as stimulating to the brain, but things that cause us to have to think, to engage the brain a little bit more. I've recently gotten into Sudoku, how we pronounce that. And I have another game that I just got addicted to where you have to pair the numbers. Either you have to match where they add up to 10 or they are the same number, and you have to kind of eliminate all the numbers, and you have 5 different opportunities to kind of pull up new numbers to bring them all together. That actually is a pretty stimulating game. It's good for the brain. It can waste a lot of time, so I got to be very, very careful with that. But, in regards to some of these games and what are most effective, very few are effective. I always laugh. There's one game that I play that periodically I get an ad pop up. It says, I'm a neurobiologist, and my elderly 60-year-old mother plays this game. And I'm like, who are you that you're saying that your 60-year-old mother is elderly and in need of these dementia games? So it's obviously an app that, first of all, they're not a neurobiologist. They're somebody who developed the app or is writing this ad and has no concept how these games actually impact our neurobiology. And I think for a little bit deeper dive into this, I would encourage our listeners to go back to episode 282, which actually should air pretty closely to when this one airs, with Dr. Therese Houston from the University of Seattle. She wrote the book Smart, 14 Simple Ways to Improve Your Life with Brain Science. And there's quite a bit of conversation in that episode and in the book about some of these different games and activities that we can do to help keep the mind sharp, and talks a little bit in there as well on the technology and the AI aspects of kind of keeping the brain sharp.
And of course, there's always a learning curve, obviously. So helping folks become digitally literate is going to be essential. That might mean, what does that look like? Well, that might mean peer mentoring, community classes, or family support.
And let's not forget how important joy and laughter are. Simply watching a funny video or connecting with a grandchild via video chat, those can all be great for stimulating the mind. And that matters just as much as any health tracker would. Again, we stress our sixth pillar as, purposeful social connection. And so whatever social connections we're going to be incorporating into our aging lives, they need to be purposeful. And whether it's via the internet or it's in person, we want to make sure they're purposeful.
So where is all of this heading? The future of age-friendly tech is incredibly promising, but it's also a little mind-blowing.
Yeah, it's interesting to see where it's going to go. I mean, I don't know that I have the wherewithal to know where all this is going to go. I mean, I'm a physiologist. I'm a, all natural kind of person, not into the tech side as well. But, we're starting to see a lot of assisted robotics that are starting to help with mobility and daily tasks. I think of the Nemo device that we recently aired, and I don't have on the top of my head which episode that was. Pretty close proximity to this one. And the device and the couple who created that, there's Jenny Heldick and Tom Andriachi. I hope I pronounced that correctly. They're two Stanford scientists that developed this. It's not, I wouldn't call it a knee brace because it really isn't bracing the knee as much as it is helping to stimulate the muscles, blocking pain sensation in the knee that gives individuals with maybe arthritis, joint issues, much more mobility. And that's going to translate into better health because they can do more. And so when you look at an aging population, being able to incorporate some of that kind of technology that can make them more active and more involved in their lives, that's going to be a big plus. And then you have a lot of some of these kind of robotic pets that are being used for dementia care that can help provide comfort and reduce anxiety. I think that's kind of interesting. I think that's on a novel front. What about you? What do you think about some of the opportunities or where we're heading?
I don't know if I'm the right person to ask. To me, it's kind of scary. It's almost like a scene from a sci-fi movie. And I mean, my dad used to watch like a lot of Star Trek when I was growing up, Star Trek Next Generation, and I thought it was always pretty cool when the staff of the Enterprise would say, "Computer, open the door," or "Computer, send a message to so and so." And now we're kind of stepping into that age where instead of saying "computer," we're saying, "Hey Google," or Alexa, or "Hey Siri," or Cortana, or whatever, and we're actually getting a response. That is interesting, but it's also kind of scary at the same time. And seeing the technology adapt and advance and learn you as an algorithm, although it can be a convenience, I don't know. There's something about it that just it kind of weirds me out personally. There's no denying that there's a lot of benefits, and you have to adapt to utilizing it as a tool, but that's all it is. It's just a tool. So I would recommend, just like you were saying, playing games where you're still keeping your mind sharp. Do things that your skill set is not going to dull. Do things that you're still practicing to sharpen your ability. Calculators are great, but it's also way better to do simple basic math on your own. Does that make sense what I'm saying at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to remember that AI is only going to be an instrument to make our lives a little bit easier, make it easier for us to connect kind of the dots in as we're trying to age well. Getting information. I mean, we have so much access to information. It is helpful to have AI be able to help us find the information quickly, but it's always important for us to be able to ascertain how useful and effective that information is, and to still keep our brains functioning a little bit more, So we don't want Alexa doing everything.
Right.
We want to be able to think on some of this stuff on our own. And we have to be careful not to become overly dependent upon AI, but use it to where it's going to help benefit us the most.
Well, speaking of benefiting us the most, I do know that there's new wave of technology that's coming out. It's like a brain computer interface. I mean, that's right along another frontier in itself. And that's technology that could essentially help restore movement, communication for people with severe impairments.
Yeah, and there's so much technology kind of coming on the forefront here. Our friend Jay has these glasses that actually are computer interfaced. And, since he's losing his vision, to be able to have glasses that can actually perceive the information in front of you and communicate to you what you are seeing or not seeing in his case, but, what's in front of you so that you can be able to move around a bit more and be able to still kind of engage in the environment. It's like, if we were having a face-to-face, he'd be able to say, your Jeff Armstrong's in front of you. He's an old bald guy with a crappy little goatee and wearing a blue quarter zip sweatshirt. And, so you get that information and now you can engage a little bit more. And I think that has some pretty interesting applications for our aging population.
Well, Say more about that. Like, what do you mean it has some interesting? What would you describe as interesting on that?
Well, I mean, just from the standpoint of the ability to make people with certain impairments more mobile, whether it's, again, helping with your vision. I mean, obviously, hearing aids have been around forever to help with our hearing. Those are getting even more beneficial. You have mobility devices that might help in assisting joint movements.
Okay.
And it might even be even robotic movements that kind of make prosthetic devices more natural and more comfortable for the user. I think it's within our imaginations what all this technology can do. And it's just having the right individuals connect the right dots and make the right technology that's just going to have profound effects on helping people live better lives and age well.
Yeah. Well, what do you, not to dive too much down a rabbit hole, but what do you think about Neuralink, where people are going through the experimental process of planting that microchip into their brain, and some individuals are using it for, just kind of having like an ability to link up with the internet or whatever, but some are utilizing it as a way where they're able to monitor a neurodegenerative genetic disease that's been passed down from generation after generation, and they're able to monitor that. What's your take on implanting technology into the human body?
A lot of it is left to be seen. I think if it can help manage conditions and make people's lives better, then I'm all for it. I don't know of any kind of nefarious applications of this just yet. I'm sure there could be some. I think any of this stuff, as we step forward into it, we have to step forward with caution and sensibility and being rational, logical, and, being considerate of the overall safety of the information that these devices could provide. If a Neuralink, if it can tap into my brain and pull information from the recesses of my mind and be hacked in, if somebody can hack into my brain, which I don't think is where we're going or where we're at with these things. But, you have to look at the potentiality of the devices, the ethics of the devices, and the benefits. So you have to weigh everything together, and we have to be very sensible in how we go forward with any of this stuff. Yeah, and I think that virtual reality is also finding applications in therapy, travel, even fitness. We talked earlier about kind of visiting museums virtually. Think about kind of walking through Paris or doing Tai Chi in a virtual garden, all from your living room. I think this can be kind of cool. Again, is it the best? Isn't it better to be out in the sunlight and going to having a real experience as opposed to virtual experience? Because I think one of our recent guests, I think it was Therese Houston, was talking about virtual connections, that we don't get the same interactions doing things virtually as we do when we're doing it in person. And so I think that's an important consideration. But from the standpoint of using AI to benefit us in helping people with severe impairments, maybe it's cognitive degenerative disease, dementia, other conditions, Parkinson's, whatever it might be. I want to give a plug for another recent guest, Shauna Sweeney.
Yeah, she was on episode 270.
Yeah, she's a former Meta executive who has launched a company called TenderCare. I kind of describe it as sort of a Angie's List for aging well, kind of the one that we envisioned before we conceived this podcast. It took somebody with the technological wherewithal to be able to put together a website that can pull together multiple different information sources to help caregivers provide for their aging adult parents, or maybe even in certain situations, children. So I think that's another good episode to kind of check out, and check out the product as well. I think she's doing a great thing. I've been working, trying to connect other guests with her to kind of pull all these pieces together. When you look at like you have Thrive 25, and you have tendercare. You have all these other online sources of information and help and assistance for guiding us through the aging process. Pulling that all together is going to be very, very useful.
Well, looking forward, equity must be, it's got to be part of the conversation because, not everyone has access to broadband internet or the latest devices. So we must advocate for inclusive design and affordability.
Yeah, and that's, I think, what I like about Thrive 25, Tendercare, Ohm, and some of the other individuals that we've interviewed on the podcast, and many of the other products, even like, talking about my AmazeFit, getting products that are useful and valuable, but are affordable. Not everybody's going to be able to afford a Oura Ring or afford a Whoop subscription. So getting that technology, maybe it's not as good as a top line, but getting it to all individuals. And it's not just about adding more tech, because I think that can be easily done. It's about making sure that the technology enhances life, it supports human connection, and it does simply replace it.
So what's our listeners' takeaway from this conversation today?
Well, first, technology can be a powerful ally in aging well when it's accessible, when it's user-friendly, and when it's aligned with real needs, whether it's a voice assistant, a smartwatch, a social app. The goal is to support autonomy, connection, and above all, joy.
Second, it's totally okay to take small steps. Try one device or platform at a time. And don't be afraid to ask for help. There are plenty of resources that are out there.
And finally, stay curious. Age-friendly tech is evolving fast, and staying informed is one of the best ways that we can stay empowered.
Yeah, stay empowered, stay informed, take these small steps, utilize technology in a world that is advancing way faster than we are, and always remember to do what you think is best for you in order to age well.
Age well. Thank you for listening. I hope you benefited from today's podcast, and until next time, keep aging well.